West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
But we begin tonight with the continued efforts by a Trump-appointed judge to defy legal norms in order to show deference to the man who put her on the bench. Of course, I'm referring to one Judge Aileen Cannon, who for a third day now has decided to give Donald Trump and his lawyers a forum to put on his newest form of a reality show in his attempts to either throw out his federal classified documents case altogether or at minimum chip away at the heaping piles of evidence prosecutors will be able to use if a trial were ever to be scheduled. It is no surprise that Trump has filed motion after motion in this case. That is his right to do. But the fact that Cannon has been willing to entertain everyone ad nauseum, even when there is little legal or evidentiary basis, only further confirms the appearance that the delay is the point. Remember, there is still no trial date, thanks to Judge Cannon, which means there are no firm deadlines in place to resolve the remaining issues. In today's episode, Trump's lawyers tried to make the case that the original search warrant used for Mar-a-Lago in 2022, which was approved by the magistrate judge under Judge Cannon, was not valid and should be tossed out along with more than 100 documents marked classified that were collected. Even more consequential was their other argument that all of those damning notes from Trump's lawyer, Evan Corcoran, that point out Trump's clear intent to obstruct justice and stalling on turning over those classified documents should also be tossed out under attorney-client privilege, even though a federal judge in Washington, D.C. already ruled that Corcoran's contemporaneous notes were admissible because of what is known as the crime fraud exception that overrules attorney-client privilege if what was discussed was in pursuit of committing a crime, like, say, obstruction of justice. We've already seen what those notes look like throughout the indictment, where it refers to Trump attorney number one, who has been identified as Corcoran. There is this part where they're discussing what to do about the FBI's subpoena request for the classified documents. Quote, Trump, in sum and substance, made the following statements, among others, as memorialized by Trump attorney number one. A, I don't want anybody looking. I don't want anybody looking through my boxes. I really don't. I don't want you looking through my boxes. B, well, what happens if we just don't respond at all or don't play ball with them? C, wouldn't it be better if we just told them we didn't have anything here? And D, well, look, isn't it better if there are no documents? And then there's also this beauty when discussing what documents they should ultimately turn over. Quote, during that conversation, Trump made a plucking motion as memorialized by Trump attorney number one. He made a funny motion as though, well, okay, why don't you just take them with you to your hotel room, and if there's anything really bad in there, like, pluck it out. And that was the motion that he made. He didn't say that. No wonder Trump's lawyers want to get those thrown out. And that's just part of it. New reporting on those notes from ABC News, who said they have reviewed the records, claims to show that Trump privately expressed concerns that turning over those classified documents after receiving the subpoena could result in criminal charges, while Trump continued to try to get his lawyers to lie and destroy documents for his benefit. Quote, he raised a question as to if we gave them additional documents now, would they, the Department of Justice, come back and say, well, why did you withhold them, and try to use that as a basis for criminal liability or to make him look bad in the press, according to Corcoran's notes. And yet, with all of these matters having already been decided by other judges, Judge Cannon has again felt the need to burn through a lot of time on Trump's behalf. And today we are again no closer to beginning a trial that Trump knows he cannot win. Joining me now is Barbara McQuade, former U.S. attorney, professor at the University of Michigan Law School and MSNBC legal analyst, and Mary McCord, former acting assistant attorney general for national security and co-host of the Prosecuting Donald Trump podcast. Thank you, ladies, both for being here. I'm going to start with you, Mary, here at the table. Is there any world in which that search warrant is invalid? And can you imagine why a judge would hold an entire hearing on that question?
I don't think there's any world based on the arguments that were made. And actually, some of the reporting out of the courtroom does seem that Judge Cannon actually was also skeptical of Trump's arguments. He made arguments in two flavors. One was that he was entitled to what's called a Franks hearing, named after a case called Franks v. Delaware, that says if there are recklessly misleading facts or omissions, or not facts, recklessly misleading information or omissions in a search warrant, and if without those there would not have been probable cause, then the entire, the evidence seized as pursuant to the search warrant can be suppressed. And he wanted to have a hearing on that and hear from agents about that search warrant.
Sure.
But the things he said were reckless omissions, were things like not saying in the search warrant that within the FBI, there were some people that thought they should ask for consent rather than do a search warrant. So what?
Right.
That has nothing to do with probable cause.
Yeah.
Things like explaining in the search warrant that when he was president, he was held a top secret clearance, and he held clearances and was able to be briefed on top secret information at Mar-a-Lago. So what? This is all post-presidency. And the reporting I saw some from out of the courtroom is that Judge Cannon at one point sort of also said, so what? Aren't we now talking about post-presidency? So I do have some optimism on the search warrant question. The other basis was that it was too broad. It allowed for a search of too many places. And Judge Cannon at some point said, well, if nothing was seized from some of the places you think that were not particularized in the warrant, then what's your harm?
Right.
And he didn't really have a response.
As response to that. And Barb, I mean, the things that Trump's lawyers seem to be bringing up are things like when they unpacked the boxes, they didn't put things back in the box exactly in the order they were in. If they were next to an old People magazine with Trump's face on the cover, it should have gone right back next to the People magazine. If they were next to some dirty drawers or a shirt in one of the other boxes where, again, classified documents shouldn't have been in the first place, well, if they didn't put it back next to the dirty drawers, then those are the kind of arguments they were making. Is there any world in which that is a reasonable argument as to why a search should be thrown out?
No, and in fact, with regard to this particular argument, Joy, they're asking not just that the evidence be suppressed, but the whole case be dismissed, suggesting that there is something nefarious going on about all of this. No, this is an issue that certainly the defense can raise on cross-examination. I don't know why it would matter whether the classified document was before or after the Christmas card that he had saved from some fan who had written him. But, to the extent it suggests that perhaps it was hidden behind another document and it was difficult for him to see, I don't think that's going to square up with the other evidence that we have seen about the obstruction and some of the other things. But that's an argument that the defense can make at trial for the jury, but it's not a basis for suppressing the evidence in advance of trial.
And see, that is the at trial is the thing to me that is the key point there. Mm-hmm. These sound like the things that should be litigated as part of a case that's happening. It seems that Judge Aileen Cannon is interested in having all sorts of hearings about all sorts of ephemeral issues regarding whether or not the trial should ever happen at all. What she's not interested in doing is starting the trial.
Or ruling on some of the motions.
Right. She's just listening to them like she's sort of in judge school and like listening to all these interesting arguments and taking her time and then not deciding anything. Is there any way for Jack Smith's office to force her to start this trial?
Not really. I mean, the trial judge has control of their own calendar. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about, will one of these opinions, if she ever issues a ruling, be appealable? And several that she heard, in fact, everything she's heard these last 3 days, a negative decision would be appealable by Jack Smith. So if she were to dismiss the case on the grounds that the special counsel wasn't properly appointed under the Constitution, or if she were to dismiss it on the grounds that the funding for the special counsel doesn't come from the right bucket of funding, that would be appealable. If she were to deny the motion to modify the conditions of release to prevent Mr. Trump from saying things that cause a significant imminent risk of danger to law enforcement, they can appeal that. And if she were to suppress evidence pursuant to the suppression motion, and that includes Evan Corcoran's notes, that would also be appealable. So these all might give depending on the ruling, give the special counsel a chance to go up to the 11th Circuit and seek a reversal, which just depending on the circumstances may or may not be a chance for them to seek a recusal. People ask about that all the time. The government is loath to seek a recusal.
But Barb, you've had all this. I mean, the Wall Street Journal, for God's sakes, has got such new information about just how many doubts the judges, the senior judge in her same circuit had about her, whether she should stay on the case. And then you add to that dragging her feet. There has been this talk of a writ of mandamus. Like, could Jack Smith file such a writ and essentially demand that a court higher than her order the start to the trial? Is that something that you cannot see happening?
Not yet. I mean, it is a possibility because, one important consideration is that it is not just the defendant, but also the public that has a right to a speedy trial. Under the Federal Speedy Trial Act, while all these motions were pending, the clock was stopped. She now that she's held a hearing, 30 days to issue decisions on these. Now, there are provisions under even the Speedy Trial Act to extend that for issues of complexity. And in this kind of case, she probably could do that. But at some point, if she simply fails to rule on these motions or set a trial date, that could be a basis for seeking a writ of mandamus, which is really just a request for the higher court to say to the district judge, make a decision, do your job. The time has come. You can't wait anymore. Again, just as Mary said, the government is loath to request a recusal. I think the government is also loath to request a writ of mandamus. It is supposed to be granted under only rare circumstances. But at some point, that is a card that the government can play if the judge continues to delay in making decisions.
It is Wednesday, the 26th of June of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is feeling a little better, but we are going to step in and seat you directly for our especially special daily special, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? And there's lots of them. Yes, there are. This whole thing about Joe, needs drugs to be able to function is the pretty much the birther equivalent. Well, Obama wasn't born here. He's a secret Muslim. Oh, God. Just the racist, xenophobic tropes that they push out. Well, pretty much the equivalent is, Joe was so doddering, the only way he can function is if he's jacked up. He has to get a shot in the ass. And it made me wonder, the way this guy, Donald Trump, is, I wouldn't have had expected him getting shots in the ass. I thought he would just be getting it in some sort of liquid that he put in his Diet Coke. So that says a little bit more about Trump than I want to know, but he likes to get a shot in the ass, and so therefore he believes everybody does. That is the mindset of the Republican generally, and MAGA in particular. If they're doing something bad, other people are doing it way worse. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing the bad thing in the first place. They have to do the bad thing because everybody else is doing it so much worse. How do you spell justification? That's right. Anyway, that's happening, isn't it? I also want to put the lie that just because there's a bunch of Trump signs out there, and I've also heard that people are taking their Trump signs down. I haven't seen it around here. Every time a new charge comes out against Trump, every time a new revelation comes out about Trump, another sign or a bunch more signs get put up. We're going to double down to kick the libs. We're going to kick the libs so hard we're going to be fascist Nazis. Yeah! That's what they wanted anyway. Who needs democracy when you can put your jack boot on the throat of, the Statue of Liberty? Yep. Anyway, so, but I just want to put the lie that just because there's a bunch of Trump signs out there doesn't mean that he's going to win. They use that excuse. I don't know. It had to have been, stolen election because we never saw a Biden sign. I hear that all the time. And you know why? Because if anybody puts up a Biden sign, you're going to get some idiot out on your front yard armed telling you we don't do this in a conservative town. So people, because I have to admit, I don't really want any property damage or my house firebombed. I grew up like that, and I don't know, maybe my parents had good insurance. I don't want to put up with it. I don't. I'm tired of it. I got tired of it actually back during Nixon when I had my own car firebombed just because I had an impeachment with honor bumper sticker. Jeez. Also had one that said 185 miles per second. Is that what it is? 189 miles per second? It's not only a good idea, it's the law. So it was a joke about the 55 mile per hour speed limit because the ad council had put out an ad about 55 miles per hour. It's not only a good idea, it's the law. So we decided we're going to make a bumper sticker with the speed of light. Even though the speed of light is not a law, but it worked for us. So I had that on my car too, but they didn't firebomb my car because of physics. Or even astrophysics. The impeachment with honor one, though. Boy. Well, I always figured if you're going to insult a Republican, you might as well insult him. The only thing is that then they come back, they firebomb your car, poison your dog with strychnine. That happened to a friend who ran for office. He won, but still, they poisoned his dog. I always presumed it was the same people or the family of those that burned down Jack London's wolf house in the Valley of the Moon. Because those families still live in Sonoma County. So I figured, their progeny down through the ages decided, oh yeah, Königshofer, let's burn him. We'll kill his dogs. And they did. It was really, I'm not going to describe it. Let's just say poisoning a dog with strychnine is, that person probably should be put in San Quentin. That's what I say. And I'm not even an advocate of the death penalty. Maybe waterboard him. Take him into, it used to be the gas chamber. Just convert the gas chamber into a waterboarding facility. Teach him a lesson or two. We don't care to hear what we want to hear. That's why people get waterboarded anyway in the first place, right? You waterboard them until they tell you what you want to hear. I don't care about the telling what I want to hear. You killed a dog with strychnine. Unbelievable. So I don't want my dogs killed. I don't want my house firebombed. It's much easier just to know that I'm going to vote Democratic up and down the ticket like a proper Oregonian would do, and these people in sundown town Southern Oregon can go to hell. Okay. They don't want to negotiate any kind of, this goes back to this attitude that it's much easier to kill someone if they're faceless, Remember that old movie back in the day, The Face of the Enemy? Yeah, it was how people could be brainwashed into being able to kill another person in a time of war because, it's hard for humans to kill humans. We're sort of wired against it. At least those of us who have that kind of wiring, which I think is, the proper way to evolve. But, that's just me. I'm a romantic. Maybe the proper way to evolve is to get the wiring where you're always at odds with each other and you're going to kill each other at a moment's notice. Drop of a hat. So, I just don't like the idea that these people want to eliminate us and they come out and say they're going to eliminate us, but it's easier to eliminate someone if they are faceless. The enemy is they. It's not, hi, friend. On the other hand, if you're going to psyop someone into doing something that's totally against their nature or whatever, programming, wiring, I don't know, brainwash them to kill a friend. I guess. But right now, the way that military psyops works on their own troops is that you have to dehumanize the other side. And it's much easier to eliminate those people who are dehumanized. The retired military lady and my neighbor, who has the giant Trump 2024 banner covering her whole garage door, actually from the eave of the garage down to, I don't know, about a foot or less from the driveway, came over and gave me a big hug because apparently she had been out of town and I didn't realize it. Because both her cars were there. But she gave me a big hug because she had heard that Mom had passed. So, my mom engaged everybody. She was a bar owner. Nazis come in, she'll tell them they're Nazis to their face. You're going to pay for that German beer? All right, drink up and get out. She always got something out of it. They didn't stay long, let's just put it that way. But she engaged everybody. And I just, she did tisk when the banner went up, let's put it that way. My mom didn't suffer fools. But when I'm about town, there's some people who know me. I try to go by my first name. I've discovered that when you're in the public eye and people know you publicly, sometimes it's good to have another identity to go under. And I do already. It's ready-made. I was born with it. And Justice is pretty much of an identifiable name, is it not? But here in MAGA country, Sundown Town, my first name, which has a Western feel to it, goes over quite well and is, in a way, nondescript. And I like it that way when I'm in town because there's some people who don't like me in town in my public persona as Justice, which is my real name, just my middle one. So, but people in town, who I know have some fairly right-wing, if not absolute MAGA tendencies, tend to be, fairly good neighbors and whatnot. So I don't know. There's a few in town that I would keep my eye on, and I do. But by and large, I think that when people deal with each other on a personal level, there's where we might be able to convince them of the error of their ways. Now, I know they feel compelled to point our errors out, but our errors are empathy, equality, diversity, inclusion, being a good neighbor. The whole backlash against political correctness, the whole backlash against this whole idea of being woke, is this idiocy that says, you can't force me to be a good neighbor. Well, why don't you just be a good neighbor? You can't force me to do anything. So instead of being a good neighbor, they double down and go, I'm going to show you I'm going to be the worst neighbor in the world. No one tells me what to do. We're not telling, we're just like suggesting, like, could you please just be a good neighbor? You're forcing me to do something I don't want to do. Okay, so now we have a whining country. Jeez. Cook and wine country, and I'm telling you, you'll never want to cook again. Everybody complains about everything. Some people say it's too runny. Some people say it's not runny enough. Okay. So, I guess with the primaries finishing up here before the big general election, things are shaking out. We see that Burbert won in her new district. Well, the vote was split among people as and even more crazy than she. Okay. She came out as the sane one on that ticket. Oh my God. And some people are saying that she's assured a win in that district against the Democratic opponent. I'm not so sure of that. I'm really not. Because in a primary, it's only the crazies of the Republican Party that get to vote. And once again, just because there's a bunch of Trump signs out there doesn't mean that there are overwhelming numbers of Democrats keeping their head down and they just go out and vote. They don't brag about it. They don't whine about it. They just go and vote. And then MAGA says, it must be rigged. There was no Biden signs. Where did all these votes come from? Well, I guess, you've intimidated your neighbors to the point that, we're a sizable block. Kind of like the silent majority. Okay. Welcome to America, pal. Jeez, you might be able to get some help in Cyrillic, but this is still America. Alrighty. Well, we have once again just pitter-pattered the morning away. Why don't we give you a rundown on what we have in store for you for our news read in this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we're in the Bistro Cafe part, and the chef's table's coming up. So just hold on. Hold on, please. Well, at the top, Canon is defying all legal norms, giving Trump a break. And it's so transparent, it's like insulting. They just love to insult. Anyway, on the rest of the menu, Oregon is the first state to join the free filing option for federal taxes. Now, we've had one for state taxes for some time, but now we're going to adopt the federal one, and that had actually been beta tested in almost a dozen states, not including Oregon, but Oregon is the actual first one to join the actual program. Well, good for us. Arizona authorities are investigating whether a 27-year-old temporary election worker in the state's largest county, Maricopa, had political motivations when he stole a fob that would allow him access to vote tabulators. I wonder, does he have political motivations? And a federal judge rejected a $30 billion settlement that would have capped the fees Visa and MasterCard charge to merchants for credit and debit card purchases. Something that had been in the works for almost 2 decades. Throw it out. Well, we'll see. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a Brazilian police officer won crucial backing to become the next head of Interpol. And Puerto Rico's Justice Department is suing at least 30 former government officials accused of corruption. so the territory can recover more than $30 million in public funds. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Once again, we'll have to forego the particulars and get right into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. And it is out of the Oregon Public Broadcasting website by Lynn Terry. When Oregonians file their federal taxes next year, they'll have a new free option, according to a release from the U.S. Department of the Treasury and the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. Oregon is the first state to join the IRS Direct File software program, which allows people to file their taxes for free. The program was pilot tested in 12 states: Arizona, California, Florida, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, Nevada, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, and Wyoming. The pilot demonstrated the potential for filers to save millions as the program expands. According to the Treasury Department, about 140,000 taxpayers tested it to file their federal taxes, receiving about $90 million in refunds. The department said they saved $5.6 million in filing fees. Paying accountants or buying tax filing software can be expensive. Surveys show the average American spends about $270 to file their taxes. And companies in the industry have spent millions of dollars lobbying to prevent the IRS from offering free tax preparation services. ProPublica has reported that in the past, of course. They forged an agreement with the IRS to offer free software for lower-income earners, but the news organization found they tucked the software into the depths of their websites, making it difficult to find. There are several other free options, but they're mostly for lower-income or older taxpayers. One, Free File Oregon, has been available for several years for state taxes, but it does not have an income limit. And this year, for the first time, the state offered its own version of Direct File for state taxes through its website. Less than 7,000 taxpayers used it to file their Oregon returns, according to the spokesperson for the Oregon Department of Revenue, Robin Maxey. He said the state expects to receive more than 2 million total returns this year. So 7,000 after 2 million. Yikes. The federal direct file program had a few exceptions during the pilot phase, with taxpayers asked screening questions to make sure they qualified. But Maxey said that based on information from the IRS, he expects the program to expand to include more taxpayers. Next year, the state and federal direct file programs will be linked on the Oregon Department of Revenue's website. Once a taxpayer completes their federal return using the software, they'll be directed to the state system to complete their state return. Both systems are mobile-friendly and considered easy to use, based on a survey of 11,000 taxpayers who used the federal system. U.S. Senator Ron Wyden, an Oregon Democrat, I would call him an Oregon Democratic senator, but that's just me. Call the news that Oregon will offer direct file for federal taxes a happy day for Oregonian taxpayers who are tired of getting ripped off by the big tax software companies year after year. Wyden continued, direct file is long overdue, and it's the kind of public service the federal government ought to be providing to Americans wherever it can. Nicholas Riccardi of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Arizona authorities yesterday, Tuesday, said they were investigating whether a 27-year-old temporary election worker in the state's largest county had political motivations when he stole a fob that would allow him access to vote tabulators just before the July 30 primary. This is not your average theft, Maricopa County Sheriff Russ Skinner said at a news conference in Phoenix, adding that he had no information yet on the suspect's beliefs, which means the guy's got to be MAGA. They always say that about MAGA. Skinner said authorities were reviewing Walter Ringfield's social media feeds and phone to determine whether he was working with anyone when he took the small black fob that allows access to the tabulators used in the county, which has been the subject of election conspiracy theories ever since President Joe Biden beat former President Donald Trump in the state 4 years ago. The article says narrowly. Why do they say like 10, 20, 30,000 is narrow? Give me a break. Trump falsely claimed there was massive fraud in Maricopa, leading to Republican lawmakers launching an error-riddled review of the ballot count and a long string of threats against the local GOP officials who stood by their staff's tallies as the county geared up for the primary, in which the Republican county recorder and a Republican county supervisors are being challenged by election conspiracy theorists. It hired more than 2,000 temporary workers to help with the election. Ringfield was one of them. On Thursday last, according to a statement from the sheriff's office, surveillance footage showed Ringfield taking one of the fobs from a desk shortly after 5 p.m. He was arrested at his Phoenix home the next day after election workers realized that one of the fobs was missing, authorities said. Ringfield told the sheriff's department he took the fob because he was trying to help clean up. He also said he had hoped to get a permanent position in the elections office, according to the agency's statement. The public defender's office said a lawyer had not yet been assigned to represent Ringfield. Skinner and Maricopa County Supervisor Bill Gates said election officials reprogrammed the tabulators to make sure they could not be accessed by the fob, and then conducted a new test of the counting equipment to make sure it worked, with observers from both major parties. A Republican, Gates stressed that the incident shows the security of the county's operation. The suspect was arrested the day we determined it was missing, Gates said. This incident has shown all of the protocols were in place. We have cameras. We have observers. The Republican National Committee, in a statement, said it dispatched staff to Maricopa in response to the incident. The party's election integrity operation is led by Christina Bobb, an attorney and former reporter for a conservative news network, who promoted the conspiratorial review of the 2020 election in the county. Anna Ziegler of the Washington Post brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. A federal judge yesterday, Tuesday, rejected a $30 billion settlement that would have capped the fees Visa and MasterCard charged to merchants for credit and debit card purchases. The decision jeopardizes an agreement reached in March that was meant to end 2 decades of litigation related to swipe fees, which card companies charge retailers on each purchase a customer makes. U.S. District Judge Margot Brody of the U.S. District Court of the Eastern District of New York said in a memo that she was not likely to grant approval to the final settlement and rejected a request for preliminary settlement approval. Brody ordered the plaintiffs to confer and respond to the ruling by this Friday. Visa and MasterCard will either have to renegotiate the settlement with the merchants or go to trial. Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, full of grace. 15 minutes into writer-director Dina Uniunas Pusic's feature film debut, Tuesday, I was thinking, how did this movie get made? Well, turns out, not by us. Kind of. It's produced by BBC Films and BFI, the British Film Institute, but it also got money from Cinereach, a New York-based indie film grant organization, and, most importantly, A24, the company that's backed Lady Bird, Moonlight, Midsummer, Uncut Gems, Problemista, You Hurt My Feelings, and Everything Everywhere All at Once. Thank goodness for A24. And British tax dollars for helping give us this weird and impactful film. So, you have Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Zora, and London-based Nigerian actor Arinze Kene as a supernatural creature, and Irish actor Lola Pettigrew playing Tuesday, Zora's bedridden, 15-year-old, very ill, constantly in pain daughter. But I don't want to give much more of a summary than that, because I went in knowing next to nothing, and really enjoyed having this movie surprise me. You never learn what Tuesday's illness is, you never find out Zora's job. They're in Britain, but where? Don't stress it. Uniunas Pusic is telling her story with broad strokes, because she's much more invested in constructing a quiet surreality than a detailed reality. It reminded me of Being John Malkovich, even though it's not a wry satiric comedy. Although a lot of critics are writing about the comedy in it, and I guess so. It's certainly not laugh out loud. It's more like the comedy of unexpected juxtaposition, an ironic understatement. Speaking of juxtaposition, Tuesday is boldly fantastical and yet solidly grounded, a powerful combination. Even when I said, what are they doing? I always understood why and what was at stake. Tuesday feels so grand and yet so tiny. I'll have to wait before I see it again, but I'm so glad it was there for me to see in the first place. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
If you came across someone struggling with hunger, how would you recognize them? By their clothes? Their age? The way they speak? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a single father of 2 who works 3
part-time jobs and still can't put enough food on the table?
Or maybe a mother who cleans offices at night,
hoping to find meeting leftovers to take home to her hungry family.
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing a
job and getting back on his feet.
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. People you pass by every day but never knew were hungry. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America, 200 Food Banks Strong, and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. June 25th is the anniversary of the Supreme Court's infamous Shelby versus Holder decision. It stripped federal oversight of states with a history of discrimination from the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Since then, over 100 restrictive voting bills have been passed by state legislatures. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 passed after decades of state-backed discrimination toward Black Americans simply trying to register and vote. The VRA Section 5 required states with a track record of discrimination to pre-clear new voting laws with the U.S. Justice Department to make sure it, quote, neither has the purpose nor will have the effect of denying or abridging the right to vote on the account of race or color. Congress renewed Section 5 in 2006 in an uncontroversial vote. In 2013, a now more conservative U.S. Supreme Court determined, against the fervent objections of democracy and civil rights groups, that Section's 5 formula for preclearance was outdated and unconstitutional. It asked Congress to legislate a new formula, which it has not done, resulting in no enforcement. Unfettered anti-voter state legislatures have passed over 100 laws restricting voting in the last decade, according to the Brennan Center for Justice. Fixes in the Freedom to Vote Act and John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act languish in a dysfunctional Congress. We have more at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day 1,400 workers at the Milwaukee Electric Railway and Light Company launched a 4-day strike. 3 unions, representing about a third of the total employees, were fighting to break the hold of the company union. The Transit and Power Company had already fired 13 workers for union activity. IBEW, Operating Engineers, and the Amalgamated Association of Street and Electric Railway Employees Union led the walkout. They demanded reinstatement of their fired co-workers. They also wanted the right to pick their own bargaining representatives and insisted the company union rescind its policy of barring strikers from membership and further employment. The walkout began early in the morning as strikers surrounded car barns, garages, and power plants. Company agents barricaded facilities with barbed wire, supplied Pullman cars for strikebreakers, and posted armed guards on streetcars. Almost immediately, striker Joseph Urbanski was mowed down and seriously injured as he tried to stop a scab streetcar. By nightfall, 5,000 strikers and their supporters had blocked 5 transit lines. They ripped protective screens from the streetcar windows and forced scab drivers to abandon their routes. As crowds swelled to 10,000 on the second day of the strike, a little more than half of all cars were in service. More than 100 streetcars had been damaged. Socialist Mayor Daniel Hoehn placed the blame squarely on the utility company. Street battles with police and scabs continued into the third day of the strike. Milwaukee's Federated Trades and Building Trades Councils threatened a general strike in the city by July 2nd if the strike was not settled. By June 30th, workers celebrated total victory when the company conceded to all of their demands. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, because there's lots more of us where we come from. Oh my. Where it is currently 65 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs only in the low 80s. What a respite from the unbearable heat. Well, it wasn't unbearable, but it was ungodly. It was hot, and now it's rather pleasant with a bit of wind, I must say. Looks like we'll have sunshine through the morning with a few afternoon clouds blowing through, and winds have picked up out of the west-northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour, bringing with it what I call a freshening breeze. Oh my. Some clouds overnight, lows in the mid to upper 50s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and then some clouds in the morning tomorrow will give way to mainly sunny skies for the afternoon, with highs once again in the low 80s, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Looks like pollen is rated as high here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 21 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is very high at level 9. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.99 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 48%, so we are drying out. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 83 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 87 and sunny with a thunderstorm advisory. Rome is 83 and sunny. Bagram is 77 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 74 and cloudy. Tokyo is 78 and mostly cloudy. Auckland, New Zealand is 53 and fair. San Francisco, California is 55 and mostly cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 76 and cloudy. And New York, New York is 83 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Jamie Keaton at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Brazilian police official Valdeci Urquiza won a crucial vote of confidence yesterday, Tuesday, toward becoming the next head of Interpol and its first leader from a developing country, after its executive committee selected the 43-year-old as its preferred candidate. Urquiza, Interpol's vice president for the Americas, is on a key track to be selected for the job by the Lyon, France-based organization's General Assembly in Glasgow, Scotland on November 7th. The Assembly has always followed the recommendations for the choice of the Secretary General from the committee, which is currently made up of 13 members. The Interpol Secretary General essentially runs the organization on a daily basis. Jürgen Stock of Germany, who has held the post since 2014, is not allowed under its rules to seek a third term. The organization has never had a Secretary General who did not come from Europe or the United States. Interpol, which has 196 member countries and celebrated its centennial last year, works to help national police forces communicate with each other and track suspects and criminals in fields like counterterrorism, financial crime, child pornography, cybercrime, and good old-fashioned organized crime. Murphy Marcos at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Puerto Rico's Justice Department announced yesterday, Tuesday, it is suing at least 30 former government officials accused of corruption to recover more than $30 million in public funds. Among those sued are 3 former legislators, including Maria Milagros Charbonnet, who was sentenced in May to 8 years in federal prison after being found guilty of theft, bribery, and a kickback scheme. Also sued are 8 former mayors, including Felix Delgado of Cantano and Angel Perez of Guaynabo. Delgado was sentenced to 1 year in federal prison in March after pleading guilty to accepting bribes in exchange for millions of dollars worth of municipal contracts. Perez was sentenced to more than 5 years in federal prison in February after being found guilty of bribery and extortion. And of course, their attorneys could not immediately be reached for comment, because they never are. Never. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. And just so you know, there is the recipe for my Metro Shrimp and Grits that comes every Thursday when I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Coast. So if you follow me on social media at Justice Putnam, you'll have quick access to those diaries. The archives of those diaries are all there. Scroll through and you'll find the recipe for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Do not be daunted. It only looks complex. It really comes together quite easily. So try it out. So, as I stated, Netroots Radio broadcasts on. So stay tuned and we will meet up here tomorrow. Right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.